Delighted to say it. I'm joined by 9-time All-Ireland winner Tommy Walsh. Tommy, how are you getting on?
Yeah, good evening, Will.
You were at the Gaelic grounds for what was a cracker of a game between Clare and Limerick on Saturday night. I think crucially it was Clare's work rate that probably made the difference, and that little bit of quality they had down the stretch, that 4-point run that they pulled off in the closing stage of the game when it was in the balance. All that coming together for Clare to get what feels like a crucial win, given how close they fought against Limerick last year.
Yeah, Will, I was lucky enough to be down there Saturday night. We used to buy CDs as young fellas. Now that's what I call music. Well, now that's what I call a championship match. It had everything, Will. Just atmosphere. It was a Saturday night of a bank holiday. It was a derby game. Like I often said about a derby game, like if you think you can run fast, if there was a line running after you, you'd see how fast you could run. Well, it's the same with a derby game. You think you're working hard. Go into a derby game, you'll work 10 times harder. And it had that. And it had stars all over the field. There was brilliant players everywhere, both Limerick and Clare. And I think it was all summed up in the end by John Conlon's interview. The excitement in his voice, the excitement in his face, his brother's wedding, he was the best man, and he was talking about how to be such an almighty roar back in the hotel, and I'd say they lifted the roof off it. And we were in the Mackey stand, and the roof is nearly lifted off the Mackey stand too, but an epic game.
The real question mark I had about that wedding, Tommy, was how could his brother have actually organised the wedding for the second weekend of Championship when they knew from a long time out they were going to be playing against Limerick at the Gaelic ground. So this wasn't an unknown, and he decided to have the wedding. And for those at the wedding party, I believe they were all clambered around one TV. They had a big 65-inch TV in the middle of the reception. I think he definitely booked that wedding for the wrong weekend.
Well, I think he knows what all married men know, is the wife calls the shots, and I think that's what happened in this instance.
Well, calling the shots on the night, Colin himself, we can talk about his performance from centre half back. He's one of those remarkable repurposed players, and I remember when he was a key forward for the Clare team, but now he's become such an anchor for their defence from the number 6 position. Thought he was great at the weekend.
Yeah, he was outstanding. I always thought, especially underage and grow up through the ranks, your best player is nearly always number 6 or number 11. And if the number 6 is going well, he's able to direct the way the game is going. We see that with Limerick, I suppose, Declan Hannon. We see it with various All-Ireland champions over the year. Number 6 is such a huge player. And Conlon is a ball player. And you have to be, because you get so many short puck outs, you're bringing the ball up through the lines. If your number 6 is on as much ball as Conlon, well, then you're guaranteed that you're onto a winner. And there was heroes all over the place, Will. Like, looking back at the game, probably the reason it was so good is there were so many great players. Like, Ever Quilligan on the goal, back in after being dropped. First few minutes saves a point-blank save from Seamus Flanagan. Just remarkable. Up the field in Conor Cleary's, what a battle he had with Galan. Like a physical battle. Galan is nearly the go-to forward in hurling at the moment. And Cleary put it up to him. This is a guy that plays football with Milltown Malbay. His brother is the captain of the footballers. Like, he probably had to make a decision a few years ago, hurling or football. And I'd say Saturday night, by God, was he happy. And all over the field, Tony Kelly, David McInerney, Diarmuid Ryan, half back line. Up front, then you have substitutes coming on, playing brilliant. And just, outstanding. David Fitzgerald on Kyle Hayes. Like, Kyle Hayes is bursting forward game after game. If to watch him, he had a great second half himself, Kyle Hayes, but he had to look after David Fitzgerald as well, and that was a great battle. So yeah, Conlon was a star, and it's stars all over the field.
Yeah, I mean, the work rate by their forwards is remarkable. No Plan BGA sent me the stats about the turnovers for the game earlier today, and he's got Shane O'Donnell down for 3 turnovers, David McInerney getting 3, Ryan Taylor coming in with 3 as well, Tony Kelly with 2. And there was a ferocity about the work rate of that Clare forward line. It was always going to be required against this Limerick team who, get so much from their defenders coming out with the ball. But being able to win back ball like that and win back the amount that they did on the Limerick puck out makes a huge difference if you're going to stop them from playing.
Yeah, all the great managers, all the great coaches, they know that to win championships you have to be able to defend well. You go back to Johan Cruyff, defending starts with your centre forward. You go back to all the modern managers, Brian Cody, Jim Gavin, the defending starts with number 15. And that was never more as evident as in the Gaelic grounds last Saturday night. Shane O'Donnell, he only came into the game as the game was going on. But off the ball, he was tracking back, he was dispossessing, he was just stopping up the Limerick runs. And that was just a sign, like, he's not a big man, Shane O'Donnell. It was only, 10 years ago, he was the hat-trick hero from All-Ireland final. Went off to Harvard. He went off and got concussed, probably asked himself, would he ever play the game again? Comes back into that game Saturday night, and what an important, not on the scoreboard, but off the scoreboard, he was so vital. Winning that dirty ball, stopping the Limerick players, playing around with the ball, which they're so brilliant at. Their defenders are as good as their forwards. And I think that's probably what won it for him Saturday night, that they just Limerick could not get quality ball into the full forward line to Gillane and Flanagan. And you have to remember as well, off the camera Saturday night, Limerick went man-to-man, or Clare went man-to-man. So it was huge acres of space in there for Flanagan and Gillane. There was probably 40, 50 metres of space, but they didn't get good ball in for the majority of the time.
Yeah, you could see that in the second half particularly. Like, that's a very brave way to play, because there were oceans of space in the corners for either Gillane or Flanagan. If, say, a counter-attack was to happen, they could easily have split them apart if they got good ball in. But Clare seemed to be quite good at recovering if they lost the ball and getting into decent defensive positions so that wasn't an issue.
It was, and even if you go back to the last sideline, the one Tony Kelly had the ball and put it out over the line, for that sideline, and we can see how far players can hit a sideline now. There was no player, there was two players, Gillane and Flanagan, with both their markers inside the 65-yard line. It was the most riskiest strategy I ever seen, but you have to be brave in these instances. We've seen Limerick before. If you give the ball to them at their full back line, they'll work that ball up and put the ball, Hegarty or Morrissey be putting the ball back over the bar. So they got their tactics right. There was high risk, but they did well. And I suppose fortune favours the brave. And the one thing to look at this is, I was looking at the Clare team before the game, and I didn't realise they were as good. Like this was before looking at the game, because I missed the Clare and Tipperary game because I was in Thurles for the Limerick and Waterford game, and I couldn't get over the strength of the Clare forwards. You have Peter Duggan, Shane O'Donnell, you have Rogers in the corner, and he had a brilliant game as a corner forward. Tony Kelly, David Fitzgerald, they've great forwards.
I wonder if Limerick regret, because every time they play against Clare, they don't put a designated man marker or a second man onto Tony Kelly. It's not the way that Limerick play. But I wonder if they regret not trying to put a closer shackle onto him at the weekend. Yeah,
you see, you don't try and fix something that's not broken. I know they drew with them 3 times over the last year, but they still beat them every time that it came down to a winner takes all. So I think the way they looked at it was, it's not about individuals, it's about winning as a team. And I would imagine their thought process was that, right, Tony Kelly might score 6 or 7 points from play here, but as a team, we're not leaking any space so that there's huge goal chances. We're not letting 2 or 3 other players come away with 3 and 4 points apiece. That, okay, one man is doing the damage, but as a unit, we're defending very, very well. And you would imagine that was the thought process behind that. But you'd have to say, Will, like Tony Kelly, it was very important in the first probably 15 minutes, very important in the last 15 minutes. But it was no way a one-man show. And there was so many other Clare midfielders and forwards that they had to look at.
Yeah, I think Dave Fitzgerald coming back into the team was a transformation from the week before as well. When it comes to Limerick, look, I'm delighted to say for your Kilkenny team, it's going to take at least 5 more years if your 21-game unbeaten streak is going to be ended. Limerick stopped at 17. What's your assessment of where Limerick are at now? Because afterwards, John Kiley was monogamous in defeat. He said, look, we've lost to a very good Clare team here. We need to go away for a couple of weeks now, heal up some of these injuries and talk about maybe some of the things that didn't work out well, and we have to concentrate on our last 2 games. But how much of a blow is this to Limerick to have suffered that first championship defeat in 4 years?
Yeah, it depends on what way you look at it or who's looking at it. First of all, records, they wouldn't care about records. The only record they want to see is an All-Ireland final or an All-Ireland medal in their back pocket, Will. What I would think is, from a Limerick point of view, you're thinking this is a great thing now for us, right? The pressure will now come off us. We can go away and train in peace. There'll be no more talk of maybe 5 in a row, 6 in a row, 7 in a row. They'll now start to talk about our competition, and all the focus won't be on how, I suppose, unbeatable we look. So I think it'll bring them back down there. He'll be able to refocus his stars. And that's the way Limerick will look at it. But for the rest of the country, you will probably look at the glass as half full too. Lads, they've been beaten, and now they can be beaten again. So their opposition will now train harder, work harder. When the game is in the melting pot with 5-10 minutes to go, like it was 3 times last summer. The Munster final, the All-Ireland semi-final, the All-Ireland final, but nobody beat Limerick. This year we've seen down the home street some beating them. So they might say to themselves with 10 minutes to go, lads, we can do it. Like we saw Waterford last week when it came down the home straight, probably just that lack of experience of winning against Limerick stopped them getting over the line near the end because they had the chances. Towards now, maybe when you're playing Limerick going forward, you might say, you know what, Clare done it, maybe today we can do it as well. And on the opposite of that, they'll be looking at maybe from the Limerick psychology, now they've been beaten coming down the home straight. Suddenly they might be asking questions of themselves. We lost during the league, the Munster League to Clare in a big, heavy hitting game. We can lose this again, and suddenly the pressure is on. The nerves come at you that bit more. So it depends on what way you look at. John Kiley will try to use it as a turn or maybe a starting point again for their season, and the opposition will look at it as a starting point for them.
Yeah, look, I think psychologically it has that impact, because you look at the way they came back against Tipperary in the Munster final when they found themselves so far behind, and even in the league semi-final this year against Tipperary where they were pushed to the pin of their collar in the first half and they put in this immaculate second half performance. Galway, Kilkenny have rattled them a few times in recent years, but Limerick are still able to get the result even in those close games. That opens up that hope for everyone else. When it comes to, and I'm not for a minute arguing that Limerick have got complacent, Tommy, because John Kiley was very clear. He said it almost feels like people are trying to soften us up by saying such nice things about this Limerick team leading into championship. But like, you can draw on your own experience here when you're with Kilkenny and you were on that winning run and you went through a year of the talk of 5 in a row. Does the outside talk ever seep into the camp at any point?
It can. It always seeps in, and it probably depends on you as a player, what stage you are at on the team. Or like, we were always afraid we'd be dropped. Like people would ask you the whole time, were you afraid of Brian Cody? Were you afraid of him? And I always say I was never afraid of Brian Cody, but I was afraid he dropped me. And that kept you, like, I know we give the interviews and Limerick give the interviews about the next game or getting on the team. But with them two managers, John Kiley and Brian Cody, that's the way you have to think. So you can't be thinking of Leinster finals or Munster finals or All-Ireland finals because you're just worried about getting on that team and turning up at training Tuesday night and Thursday night. That's not just media talk. That's the way it was, and that's the way it is. You look at Gerard Hegarty last weekend, like 2 times man of the match in an All-Ireland final, hurler of the year, just brilliant performances, always turns up on the big day, and John Kiley dropped him for a big match, a big derby game that they needed to get back on track. So I don't think complacency, listen, it doesn't come in through players getting big egos, but it can seep in, I suppose. And the league probably for them was tough in the fact that they rotated their players well, but still won so easily. They played the league final against Kilkenny, and you could go through a number of their players and didn't have particular games and particular good games, and they still beat Kilkenny by, was it 10 or 12 points? So, I think that all adds up, and I think this definitely will re-energise them. But, the matches come so thick and fast. The one advantage we had was we had probably 2 or 3 weeks between games. Towards Limerick only have a week or two. I know they've 3 weeks for the next game, but probably a run of games again. So you don't have that much time to recover and have a good training match. It's just recovering week to week, and So listen, they'll be okay, I would imagine, but it's all to play for Munster, no doubt about it.
Yeah, like, for a perfect neutral, and both of us are neutrals in this watch in Munster currently, this makes it very interesting because Clare's defeat against Tipperary in the first round put them under pressure straight away. Waterford now lost 2 games. Limerick have lost a game. We'll see how this weekend goes. But generally, there's that assumption that probably for both Limerick and Clare, they're going to need to win their last 2 games to be assured of getting to a final.
Yeah, is that it? Yeah. Like, I would think normally there's a couple of teams playing poorly, and after the week or two you can nearly predict who will probably go through, and the third team might come through on basically scoring average, or things might just work in their favour. But looking at the Munster Championship so far, you would say, like, if we take, if we presume Limerick will go through, which they might not, but if they recover their form and go through, well, the next 3 places, we'll say Waterford are playing poorly, but Clare, Cork and Tipperary, like, they're playing fantastic hurling at the moment, and wouldn't it be unbelievable, like, if one of them goes out? Now, listen, there's only been, like, you can't judge Cork too much on one game. I know they brought back the fighting spirit of Cork, and things look good, but you don't know. You'll have to see them over, 3 or 4 games. Tipperary have only played 1 game. They conceded, was a 3-21 in that game down in Ennis. So Clare, whilst they have beaten Limerick, they have been beaten by, or they beat Limerick, they've been beaten by Tipperary. So we'll see after a couple of games how things are going. But at the moment, it just looks like dog eat dog, and there could be a good team playing well going out of the championship.
Yeah, like we might get a better assessment of Cork after the Tip game this coming weekend. But Cork had it so easy because of the way they started the game against Waterford at the weekend, to be 12 points to 2 up, sitting very comfortably 9 points up at half time. Waterford came back into it a little bit in the second half, but Waterford will be, I would think, Tommy, terribly disappointed with how they performed after putting in a good shift against Limerick the week before.
Yeah, well, winning is a habit, Will, and so is losing. And the worst type of loss is when you play really well and lose. Because you can imagine, same last year when they played Limerick, same this year, played fantastically well. Their spirit was very good, their work rate was very good. They missed a couple of chances, which you don't mind normally. Mistakes happen. And so everyone is clapping you on the back saying you were great, lads, but you lost. So you'd have a terrible feeling still when you go to bed at night that you're after getting beaten again. Like, they're now 1 win in 14 championship games. It seeps into you, absolutely, because when you're training now, you score a point in training. You're not thinking back of when you scored a point and you won a match. You're thinking back when you scored a point and you lost a match. So it feeds into training, it feeds into your preparation, it feeds into your confidence levels. And I thought last weekend against Cork, Waterford they were showing all the signs of a team that was just beaten, taking beating after beating. There was a time in the second half they were struggling to rise the ball, they were struggling to pass the ball, all the basics that these guys are well able to do. But just like, their record is it's incredible for such a good team, and players that have won minor All-Irelands, have won under 21 All-Irelands. These guys have produced it, like, in big games, in the knockout games, which you would say there's more pressure on them. They got to, was it the All-Ireland semi-final and All-Ireland final in both them years. So, like, these guys can perform under pressure, but for whatever reason, these Munster round robins are just not working for them. Now, the home and away game is massive.
Yeah.
Like, you take it in Thurles against Limerick, there was only 3,000 or 4,000 Limerick supporters or Waterford supporters. Towards it was full to the stadium was full with Limerick supporters. And again, the weekend in Páirc Uí Chaoimh, full of Cork supporters. Cork supporters are great travellers anyway, home or away, and great supporters of sport. But they outnumbered probably 5 or 6 to 1, were they saying on the Sunday game. So it has to have a huge effect not having any home games. And not only do you not have a home pitch, but you don't have a home crowd. When the game is in the melting pot, you can imagine if they were down the home straight against Limerick when the game was in the melting pot that day, if they had 6,000 or 7,000 Welsh Waterford supporters in Welsh Park, how they probably would have got them over the line. So, it's tough, but they're going to need something. They're not gone yet. Cork lost 2 games last year and got through. So Waterford are going to have to pick up the pieces, go back to basics, and try and just dog one over the line.
How much of a loss is Tadhg de Burca, though? Like, it feels to me, Tommy, as if he was set up to kind of dictate how they move the ball out of their defence. He's a very good defender himself, and to see him in the recovery boot and the talk that his Achilles is going to keep him out for the entire season, I think that's a huge blow. Yeah,
well, it's a huge blow, probably mentally and emotionally, for his friends and his fellow players in the group and the manager, because to see Tadhg, what kind of a commitment he puts into it, like, by all accounts, what he'd done to come back from these 2 cruise ships is off the charts. I know players myself that probably are the same mindset as Tadhg, and like, you're just behind him every step of the way. You hope things go well when they come back, and for this to happen again and again and again to Tadhg de Burca, I'd say mentally and emotionally it's heartbreaking that way, to see your player and friend, for things like that to happen to him. But I don't think you can make it as an excuse for the team, because, do you blame the management? They're after having 3 or 4 different managements at this stage. Do you blame the players? They're after dropping players, they're after starting players, they're after doing so many different things. So I just think they just need to just get down to basics and just try and get one over the line. Like, there's so many things probably going wrong for him, but I definitely think the home advantage is a huge thing, and I think they just need to get a bit of luck, and get over the line.
On Sunday afternoon, you weren't at Páirc Uí Chaoimh, you were at Nolan Park watching the return of Henry Shefflin's Galway to Nolan Park, and this is one I was kind of watching the telly. It's kind of difficult to assess, because Galway were really good at periods in the first half, particularly Brian Concannon did a remarkable job. He was like a man possessed during the first half. Then Kilkenny seemed to get a good handle on it, and you saw Owen Cody being almost equally impressive up the other end. And it felt like both teams weren't too unhappy about taking a draw at the end of it.
Yeah, because definitely Galway will be the happier because they played Wexford already and they've got the win there. Kilkenny still have to go down to Wexford Park in their last game, and if everything's on the line, like results haven't been kind to Kilkenny against Wexford in recent times, like since probably Davy Fitz took over down there. So listen, it's good not to be beaten by your main rival in the province, but still it was a game that Kilkenny probably felt they should have won because they were, up 5 or 6 points at one stage coming down the home straight, or I'd say 3 points coming into injury time. But when the third official put up the sign for 5 minutes, injury time, I think I even felt at the time suddenly Galway still have a chance of coming back. They were playing with gale force wind, and if it went up at 2 or 3 minutes, you'd say, listen, we'll hang on here. We'll throw in the shackles. We'll toughen it out here, and we'll win by 3 or 4 or 2 or 3. It doesn't matter. But when they say there's 5 minutes, suddenly that gives everybody from Galway a lift. And they brought on a couple of subs. They brought on Declan McLaughlin and Liam Collins, and they were big calls. They brought them on for Conor Cooney and Conor Whelan, and I would think like big management calls coming down the home straight against Kilkenny in Nolan Park. You need experience here, guys that have been there and done that. And they might get a score to get you over the line. Brought 2 young lads, fearless, and they scored the last probably 2 points of the game. And magical stuff for 2 young players to come on and get the draw for young McLaughlin. So give him confidence, and probably will beef up training for the next couple of weeks in regards guys will think they have a chance. But I was looking at the spread of scores, and you might have a few stats, man, on your road shows, and there was 24 different scorers in the game. Galway had 14 different scores, Kilkenny had 10. And I'd love to know, was that a record? But, over the next, maybe one of our texters might text in, but I thought it was remarkable to have 24 different scores in one game. And Galway especially, I have noticed Galway over the last maybe couple of years, they do have a huge spread of scores, scoring 1 point and 2 points. They rarely have lads scoring, maybe 2 or 3 lads scoring 4 or 5 points from play. It's normally, 9 or 10 scores, scoring 1 point or 2 points. But the weekend they had Concannon. The week before that, they had Evan Nyland. Nyland scored 7 points from play, and Brian Concannon scored 1 5. And his performances like that probably do get you a point when you shouldn't have got a point.
Maybe it says a lot about modern hurling. I know Paul Murphy, your former teammate's a massive fan of Mikey Butler. For Mikey Butler to be popping over shots from pretty much around his own 45 and putting it between the posts, that's why you're getting so many scores at the moment. These guys have no problem walking out from cornerback and having a shot. Yeah,
absolutely. And you only have to go back probably 15 years ago. If a cornerback scored a point, he'd be man of the match. I think that Ollie Canning scored one up in Salt Hill one year against Tipperary, and people are speaking about it for weeks after. So it's definitely not a rarity anymore. And Mikey Butler will be seen as more of a man marker than a scorer, but that's the way the game has evolved.
I'm respectfully informed when it comes to Ollie Canning that apparently he has lots of forward pedigree as well. He hit a crossbar when he was playing under 20, I think, as a forward back in around 1999 as well. So apparently Ollie was a guy who was as good as the other Cannings further forward, but he was eventually moved back because of his skills there. I'm reliably informed by James Scale on that one.
And he scored that with a roundy blue micro helmet as well.
No doubt. Are Dublin mad to move their game on Saturday? Well, it is moved at this stage against Wexford. I can't believe they didn't want to use the confines of Parnell Park, where they're very difficult to beat. You only have to think back to their game against Galway in 2019. To move this to Croke Park has to give an advantage to Wexford.
I wonder, did they have a say in the matter that Micheál Donoghue and the panel? I don't know that, but you would imagine if they did have a say in it, I'd say the only reason they went is probably to do with a young team. I was looking at their team for the first game, and I didn't know a lot of their players. Keane Ball and Danny Sutton. But a lot of guys went on holidays. Chris Cummey and a few more, O'Callaghan, and I didn't know. They're obviously youngsters coming through, so you would imagine that. But Anthony Dalia had spoken to him as well, and he was very impressed. He thought these young fellas coming through are good and fast and good hurlers. So you would imagine maybe, is that the reason they're going to Croke Park? When you have young, fast players, you want him in Croke Park and not Parnell Park. If you had the old, the Liam Rushes and the Chris Cummies and these guys playing, you would imagine the tight confines of Parnell Park would be a place that they would love and they would cherish, and maybe but possibly if they had the choice, I would imagine Wexford are moving on in their years. All their main players, you have Lee Chin, you have Dee O'Keefe, you have Conor Mack. Like, these are all the crew from 21s of 0, was it 13, 14 and 15. So they're all hitting 29, 30, 31 at the moment. So maybe Micheál is looking at speed as opposed to strength, and that's why he allowed it to be moved to Croke Park.
Yeah, Dublin getting their first win of the campaign. They've won the draw so far after beating Westmeath the weekend, while Wexford picked up a 4-point victory against Antrim. Hurling here and Off the Ball is with thanks to Bord Gáis Energy. Hurling is anyone's game, and we have teamed up with Bord Gáis Energy, sponsors of the Senior Hurling Championship, to uncover stories highlighting the positive impact hurling has had on people's lives. For the full competition details, please visit bordgaisenergy.ie/home/BGE-GAA. Tommy, thanks a million for joining us. Have a good weekend.